The 1990s in Japan are remembered today as a golden era that can never be repeated. This was the time of the bubble era, when the Japanese economy expanded to incredible proportions and corporate budgets were so overflowing that engineers were granted absolute freedom. It was a unique moment in history when financiers stopped counting pennies and instead allowed creators to build the cars of their dreams. It was during this time that legends were born, names we still utter with reverence today: the Nissan Skyline GTR, the Toyota Supra, the Honda NSX. But among this brilliant constellation, there was one car that always stood slightly apart, as if wrapped in a cloud of mystery and elegance. It didn't try to be the most powerful brute on a straight line, nor did it strive to be a practical family coupe. It had only one, almost maniacal goal: to achieve engineering and aesthetic absolute. This is the story of the Mazda RX-7 in its final and greatest form, the FD3S. A car dubbed the Japanese Porsche, which by many objective measures truly surpassed its German benchmark, only to ultimately fall victim to its own perfection in a war for survival. To truly understand the character of the RX-7, we must descend into the very depths of its mechanical heart. There, you won't find the usual cylinders, valves, or pistons performing the reciprocating motions familiar to everyone. Instead, there beats a heart that became both Mazda's greatest blessing and its heaviest curse: the Wankel rotary engine. The history of this engine is an epic of sheer persistence. While the rest of the world, faced with the initial difficulties of rotary operation in the 1960s, refined a classic internal combustion design, Mazda spent decades standing alone in its belief in the idea of a triangle rotating inside an epitrochoidal housing. For the Japanese, it was a matter of honor, a symbol of their independence as an automaker. Why was this so crucial for the ideal sports car? The answer lies in physics. First, there is the incredible compactness. The 13B REW engine is physically no larger than a medium-sized suitcase. This allowed engineers not just to place it under the hood, but to shove it deep behind the front axle line, as close to the driver as possible. This made the car effectively mid-engined, resulting in that legendary weight distribution, a perfect 50-50. Second, there is the weight. A rotary engine weighs 2 to 3 times less than any piston engine of similar power. In the world of high speed, where every gram is an enemy to inertia and handling, Mazda gained an advantage that competitors couldn't catch even by colossal increases in horsepower. In the early 1990s, when the project codenamed Zero began, chief engineer Takahama Nuchi turned development into a true ideological war against excess weight. He set an almost impossible task for his team. Every component, every detail had to be subjected to critical analysis. It was a true engineering mania. Designers checked every nut, every bolt. If there was even the slightest possibility of replacing steel with aluminum, it was done immediately, regardless of cost. The FD3S suspension became a true work of art. The arms were die-cast from aluminum alloy under high pressure, making them exceptionally light and rigid. Even small details like the jack in the trunk or the seat frames were lightened to the limit. Engineers even went so far as to make the wiring thinner and the glass lighter in certain areas. The result of this struggle stunned the automotive world. The rotary car weighed only 1,280 kilograms. At the same time, its main rival, the Porsche 911 in its 964 generation, was significantly heavier and had a much more complex, treacherous character due to the heavy engine literally hanging behind the rear axle, threatening to send the car into a spin in every sharp corner. The Mazda, however, felt like an extension of the driver's nervous system. Yet the true technological challenge that made the whole world envious was the forced induction system. The Mazda FD3S became the world's first production car to be equipped with a sequential twin-turbo charging system. It was an incredibly complex engineering feat featuring 2 Hitachi turbochargers. They operated using a very clever algorithm. At low RPMs, when exhaust energy is low, only one small turbine worked. It spooled up instantly, eliminating the turbo lag hated by every racer and providing a boost from the very bottom. As soon as the tachometer needle crossed the 4,500 revolutions per minute mark, the computer opened a complex system of valves, and the second, larger turbine joined the fray. This transition was so finely tuned that the driver felt not just a push, but an infinite wave of acceleration that picked the car up and didn't let go until the dizzying red line at 8,000 revolutions per minute. It was a true symphony of metal, air, and fire, unparalleled among road cars of that time. When, in 1993, the world's most influential automotive publications pitted the Mazda RX-7 in a direct duel against the Porsche 911 Carrera, the test results had the effect of a bomb blast. On the track, the Mazda wasn't just faster, it dominated. It was more stable at the apex, it braked later, and its steering transmitted so much information that the driver felt as if they could feel every grain of sand on the asphalt through their fingertips. In that same year, Playboy magazine, whose opinion in those days shaped the lifestyle of entire generations, officially named the RX-7 car of the year. It left behind not only the refined Porsche, but also the crude, monstrous Dodge Viper with its massive V10. But the Mazda didn't just win with numbers. Its design was something unearthly, created under the leadership of Tom Matano according to the philosophy of organic forms. It didn't have a single sharp line. Every curve of the body was dictated by airflow. It was a liquid, flowing silhouette that even today, 3 decades later, looks more futuristic than many modern EVs. People didn't just look at it. They admired it as a sculpture in a museum of modern art. However, at this moment of absolute triumph, dark clouds began to gather over the RX-7. Being a Porsche killer on an ideal racing track is one thing, but being a reliable companion in real life is quite another. It was here that Mazda began to lose dramatically. The main problem was the very nature of the rotary engine combined with extreme boost. The 13B REW engine required not just regular maintenance, but true religious fanaticism from its owner. The thin metal seals at the corners of the rotor, known as apex seals, had a critically limited lifespan. In real-world conditions, they rarely lasted more than 80,000 to 100,000 kilometers. If the owner forgot even once to check the oil level, and the rotary engine is designed to consume oil to lubricate the combustion chambers, or if the cooling system had the slightest failure and the engine overheated, it meant an immediate, inevitable, and insanely expensive rebuild. Furthermore, a true thermal hell reigned under the hood of the FD3S. 2 turbines, placed in a very cramped space, generated such a high amount of heat that after a few years of operation, all the plastic connectors and rubber hoses under the hood became as brittle as eggshells. Owners horrifiedly called the engine bay a snake pit or a rat's nest because of the incredible number of vacuum lines and solenoids controlling the boost system. The smallest crack in one of these tubes led to the complex sequential turbo system failing to function correctly, turning a masterpiece of engineering into a pile of unmanageable iron. While Porsche engineers in Stuttgart were systematically working to make their 911 a reliable daily car that could go for groceries in the morning and to the track in the evening, the Mazda remained a temperamental, exquisite, but very fragile prima donna. Then big politics and ruthless economics entered the game. In the mid-90s, the Japanese financial bubble finally burst, plunging the country into a deep recession. The value of the Japanese yen skyrocketed, instantly making Japanese exports incredibly expensive. The price of the RX-7 in US and European dealerships jumped to such heights that it suddenly found itself in the same price category as prestigious European brands. A buyer in Los Angeles or London was faced with a difficult choice. Buy a Mazda that every other mechanic was afraid to service and that could die from one bad tank of gas, or invest in a Porsche, which had decades of racing history, a prestigious brand status, and a developed service network. For most, the choice was pragmatic and obvious. Mazda lost its main trump card, affordability. Sales began to plummet. The Mazda Corporation simply didn't have the money to radically update the platform or develop a new, more reliable engine that would meet the new realities. They continued to produce the FD only for the domestic Japanese market, creating increasingly perfect but increasingly expensive special versions. In the later series, such as the Series 8, engineers tried to fix the teething problems by improving cooling and computer tuning, and the peak of evolution was the Spirit R version, a true diamond for collectors. But the finale was decided not by engineers, but by environmentalists. New emission standards were becoming increasingly strict, and the specific rotary engine, which emitted oil combustion products into the atmosphere, simply couldn't fit the new norms. In 2002, the last Mazda RX-7 FD rolled off the assembly line in Hiroshima. It was the end of an era. Its successor, the RX-8, though an interesting car, no longer possessed that uncompromising charisma, that boosted madness, and that perfect purity of lines that made the FD3S a legend. But it really lose? If we open the dry reports of sales departments and profit tables, yes, Porsche won this war completely. However, if we look at global automotive culture, we see a completely different picture. The Mazda RX-7 FD didn't just go down in history. It turned into an icon, an object of almost religious worship. Its impact on pop culture was colossal. It became the main star of the cult anime Initial D, where its bright yellow silhouette, driven by Keisuke Takahashi, became a symbol of drifting and night mountain racing in Japan. It was etched into the memories of millions of teenagers worldwide thanks to the Fast and Furious film series, where an extreme body kit from the Valeside workshop made it the most recognizable car of a generation. Today, more than 20 years after production ceased, finding a living, authentic RX-7 FD is a task bordering on the impossible. Most of them were crashed in races, tortured by poor tuning, or simply rotted in garages due to the impossibility of repair. That is why the prices for well-preserved examples today have shot into the stratosphere, often exceeding the $100,000 mark at international auctions. Collectors hunt for them as fiercely as for classic Porsches of the same period. The community of rotary engine fans worldwide is a separate caste of people willing to endure all the car's whims, accept huge fuel and oil costs, and know every vacuum hose by heart, all for one thing. That incredible feeling when the car dives into a corner and the engine makes its specific, unique sound at 8,000 RPM. The Mazda RX-7 was a car that dared to challenge not just its competitors, but the very laws of physics and market expediency. It was faster than a Porsche on the track. It was lighter, it was aerodynamically superior, and many would say significantly more beautiful. Its failure in the market was not a failure of engineering thought. It was a tragic mix of global economic circumstances, a bad moment in history, and the absolute uncompromising nature of its creators. Mazda's engineers refused to compromise. They didn't want to make it simple or ordinary. They built the best sports car they could imagine, and that sport car turned out to be too complex and too pure for this pragmatic world. The Porsche 911 remained the king of the roads because it was the smart, logical, and reliable choice. But the Mazda RX-7 remained the queen of our hearts and dreams because it was the choice of pure passion. It is a grand monument to an era when car creators were more important than marketers, when risk was considered an honor, and when one perfect turn was worth putting everything on the line. And even if it lost the war in the showrooms, it forever won its battle for eternity, remaining in memory as the car that reached for the stars but burned in the rays of its own perfection.